We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
We're diving into a stack of your sources today, all centered on, well, the really volatile situation happening in Los Angeles. As of today, June 13th, 2025.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Definitely. We've got news reports from KTLA, CBS, CNN, AP, Daily Wire, NPR, NBC, The Guardian, MSNBC, the LA Times, plus court documents, a real mix.
A broad spectrum of sources, which is good for getting different angles.
Our mission here: break down these complex events, look at who's involved, the legal fights, the history.
They really distill it down,
Yeah.
right? Help you understand the core issues, what's really going on.
Exactly. The essential insights. So let's start at the beginning. Where did this spark?
Okay, your sources point pretty clearly to Friday, June 6th.
Right.
That's when federal immigration enforcement, specifically IC operations, really intensified across LA, but also places like Paramount, Compton.
And this was a DHS initiative.
Yes, part of a stepped-up effort by the Department of Homeland Security. The result was, well, hundreds of detentions reported.
Now, DHS said they were targeting individuals with criminal records.
They did state that, but advocacy groups immediately pushed back.
How so?
They argued the operations were overly broad, very disruptive to the communities involved, not just targeted arrests.
And that pushback became visible pretty quickly.
Almost immediately, you saw protests starting to gather outside federal buildings, detention centers, especially downtown LA.
Were these big protests right away?
The sources say they were largely peaceful at first,
Yeah.
but they grew fast in size and intensity.
Okay, so peaceful beginnings, but growing fast. Then the weekend hits, June 7th and 8th. And this is where things seem to really escalate.
Absolutely. That's the turning point, according to multiple reports. The protests spread out from downtown.
To Paramount and Compton, like you mentioned.
Exactly. And critically, some demonstrations turned violent.
What kind of violence are we talking about?
We see reports of objects being thrown at police, rocks, bottles, even Molotov cocktails mentioned in some sources.
Wow. And property damage, too. I saw mentions of vehicles.
Yeah, that's in there. Including, interestingly, Waymo autonomous cars being set on fire.
Huh, specific.
And some businesses faced vandalism, looting. But, and this is a really important point your sources make consistently,
Yes.
the scale is different from 1992, the Rodney King riots. This wasn't that level of citywide destruction, despite the violence.
That's a crucial distinction. Still, it got intense enough for curfews.
Yes, local authorities imposed curfews in parts of LA.
And the LAPD chief, Jim McDonnell, he had some strong words.
He did. He described officers being attacked with commercial-grade fireworks, also hurled concrete blocks. He sounded genuinely dismayed.
He made a distinction, didn't he, between the protesters and...
Right. He talked about managing mobs of people who turned violent, separating that, from the initial immigration enforcement issue itself.
And arrests followed.
Many arrests, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots for failure to disperse because of the curfews, but some for more serious charges, too.
There was one high-profile arrest mentioned.
David Fuerte, yeah. President of SCU California, the big union. ICE alleged he interfered with their agents.
Which SEIU denies.
Strongly disputes it, yes.
Yeah.
That arrest really highlights how this broadened out, drawing in different groups and becoming sort of a flashpoint.
Okay, so you've got this backdrop. Growing protests, some violence, local police feeling stretched, curfews.
A very tense situation on the ground.
And this leads directly to the federal response. Saturday, June 7th, President Trump issues a memorandum.
Ordering the deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles.
And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed this.
He did. Talked about federalizing maybe 2,000, possibly up to 4,000 Guard troops.
But that wasn't all.
No. Then came something even more, well, dramatic. the deployment of active duty U.S. Marines.
Active duty? For a domestic situation like this, that feels unusual.
It is. Your sources definitely describe it as a rare move. About 700 Marines, mainly from 29 Palms out in the desert.
What was the administration's reason? Their stated purpose for bringing in Marines?
According to administration statements and military figures like Major General Scott Sherman, it was about supporting federal law enforcement, protecting federal property and personnel. And, crucially, quelling what President Trump explicitly called a rebellion.
A rebellion. Strong language.
Very. There was some initial talk, sources mentioned, about Guard troops possibly accompanying IC agents for protection.
But that changed.
Military officials later clarified Guard members weren't actually detaining civilians. The Marines, though, they were assigned to protect federal facilities under something called Task Force 51.
Okay, federal troops, Guard and active duty Marines deployed to LA streets. This must have set off alarms politically and legal.
Oh, immediately. A huge firestorm. Governor Gavin Newsom, L.A. Mayor Karen Bass, they strongly condemned it.
And Newsom didn't just condemn it, he took action.
He filed a lawsuit, straight away.
What was the core of his argument?
That the president unlawfully bypassed him, federalizing the state's National Guard without the governor's permission. The 10th Amendment, he argued states' rights and overstepping presidential authority under Title X, the law governing the military.
And a key part of this was the rebellion claim, right?
Exactly. Newsom argued, and Mayor Bass echoed this, that while there was violence, it just wasn't an insurrection or rebellion as needed to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807.
That's the legal basis the administration seemed to be using.
That appears to be the justification. Newsom also argued the military presence would actually escalate things, make it worse.
And President Trump, how did he respond to this pushback?
Very forcefully. Through platforms like Truth Social, he doubled down.
Still using terms like rebellion.
Repeatedly. Rebellion, lawless violence. He thanked the Guard, claimed LA would be burning without him. And he took aim at Newsom and Bass directly.
Calling them
incompetent and very slow. Sources also report him saying something like, the standard for deploying Marines domestically is, quote, what I say it is.
Implying very broad executive power.
That's certainly the interpretation. And FBI Director Kash Patel reportedly backed the administration's stance, framing it as necessary to protect federal officers.
So, a major clash of powers. Federal versus state. Executive versus, well, legal constraints. And it moved to the courts very quickly.
Amazingly fast. Newsom's lawsuit landed in front of U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer in San Francisco.
And Judge Breyer ruled pretty quickly, too, right? Thursday, June 12th?
He did. Issued a 36-page decision, and it was a significant one.
What did he find?
He found that California was likely to succeed on the merits of its challenge. Basically, he agreed with Newsom.
Calling Trump's actions
illegal, exceeding statutory authority, violating the 10th Amendment, and crucially,
the Insurrection Act point.
Yes. He explicitly stated the protests fall far short of a rebellion under that act. He was very clear on that.
Did he raise concerns about civil liberties?
He did. The ruling noted the court was troubled by the idea that protesting against the federal government could justify military deployment, saying it implicated First Amendment rights.
So, based on all that, what did he order?
He ordered President Trump to return control of the California National Guard back to Governor Newsom. A clear win for the state, initially.
And initially, because that wasn't the end of it.
Not at all. The Trump administration immediately appealed Judge Breyer's ruling, took it straight to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals.
And the Ninth Circuit acted fast, too.
Very fast. Late that same Thursday, they issued an administrative stay.
Okay, what does an administrative stay mean in practical terms?
It means Judge Breyer's order is temporarily paused, halted.
So the National Guard remains under federal control for now.
That's the effect, yes. The stay allows the administration to keep the current deployment structure Guard federalized, Marines present, while the appeals court takes a longer look at the case.
So the legal battle is ongoing.
Very much so. A hearing before a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit is scheduled for June 17th. So just a few days away, that will be critical.
This whole situation, it really forces us to look at the laws governing military use inside the U.S. Historical context seems important here.
Absolutely. The obvious comparison people make is the 1992 L.A. riots. Federal troops were deployed then, too.
But you said earlier the sources differentiate this time.
They do. The scale, the specific trigger being federal policy, the prominent use of active duty troops. It feels like a different dynamic, even if the comparison is inevitable.
And the legal framework itself is pretty old. 2 key acts keep coming up. First, Posse Comitatus.
Right. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. Generally, it bars using the U.S. military, Army, and Air Force, specifically named for domestic law enforcement.
Unless Congress allows it or there's a constitutional exception. What about the Marines?
It gets a bit technical because they're Navy, but the principle generally extends. The military isn't supposed to police U.S. citizens on U.S. soil.
But then there's the exception, the Insurrection Act.
From 1807, that's the big one here. It does allow the president to deploy troops domestically to suppress insurrection or domestic violence if state authorities can't or won't handle it.
And that's the core legal fight, whether LA 2025 meets that 1807 definition.
Precisely. Did the situation rise to insurrection or rebellion? Judge Breyer initially said no. The administration argues yes. The Ninth Circuit will weigh in next. The use of Marines likely hinges on the Insurrection Act overriding Posse Comitatus in this specific circumstance, assuming the act applies.
So pulling it all together, where does that leave things right now, today, June 13th?
It leaves Los Angeles in a very tense, uncertain state.
Protests are still happening.
Yes, sources indicate protests continue. The National Guard and the Marines are still visibly present.
And the legal fight is front and center.
Absolutely. Everything feels like it's hanging on that upcoming Ninth Circuit hearing.
It really feels like a major test, federal versus state power.
Presidential authority limits.
Balancing order and civil liberties.
Especially around contentious issues like immigration. It touches on so many fundamental pressure points.
That June 17th hearing feels incredibly important then.
It's pivotal for the immediate situation in LA, certainly, and potentially for setting precedents about how these laws are interpreted going forward.
Okay, so we've taken this deep dive through your sources. From the initial ICE raids, the protests escalating, the really controversial federal military deployment.
Through the governor's lawsuit, Judge Breyer's initial ruling against the feds, and then the appeals court pausing that order, keeping troops in place.
It's a fast-moving story, hitting right at the core of federalism, executive power, civil rights, and just what counts as domestic unrest today.
And it leaves you with a really profound question, doesn't it?
Which is?
As technology changes, as protests evolve, how do these legal frameworks, laws written in the 1800s like the Insurrection Act, how should they apply to modern disturbances?
Yeah, how do you interpret and apply them fairly and effectively today? That's definitely something to think about.
It's exactly what the courts are wrestling with right now.
Well, thank you for letting us take this deep dive into your sources with you today.